Hello, welcome to the Follow-Up Podcast, episode 21. We have a sterling pick today. We have another Diary of CEO podcast. We're doing the one with Bill von Hippel. He's a behavioral psychologist, and we were Kylie let me pick it out today because we didn't have any on the list. And this one was another one. I like the ones that just pop up. That Von Hippel is not someone I regularly listen to. It's not something I expected. He's not in the news. I guess he's got a new book coming out, which is why he's showing up now. But this is kind of one out of right field that I just casually clicked on and really liked. So one of the things, or let's start here. The reason I really like these is he essentially asks why humans do what we do, like these behavior psychologists, and they try to look back evolutionarily through the lens and say, okay, we do these things. Why would that be the case? And I'm a big believer that the understanding these is very important if you want to be happy or successful in the modern world. I think there's a lot of mismatch between the environment that our genetic code was selected on and what we have now. And we are always talking on this podcast about how fast things are changing, and they're going to change even faster. I think these topics are even more prescient with that being a fact. Is we have got to have a good understanding of why our genetic code is the way it is and what it's trying to incentivize. If we're going to, I don't know the right word here, if we're going to stay sane, I don't know,
Not
prevent
go
from
towards
being
a dystopian world where
right.
there's like no
Per,
happiness, but
yeah,
like everything, there's no, there's a lack of
yeah, just being
motivation.
so mismatched to the environment you're in. So, I'm curious, Conley, because we haven't talked about this. What did you think about this episode? Because I really liked it.
Um, I I was hoping to present some good thoughts first, but if you're asking my overall summary, I didn't love it. I was really curious to come on here and see if did you listen to it before you chose it, or did you read the
I
title?
listened to the first like 40 minutes.
Oh,
Did you listen to it on the way home from the ski trip?
yep.
Okay.
I There's some gripes about just I thought there was some interesting things going on, but I the part I liked the most was the end, when he was talking about his team's research and what they're doing because
With the Whoop data?
um, yeah, all the stuff his team's doing because in general how I saw it was like all these trends you see on the internet, like health trends, optimizing sleep, performance. He kind of addressed those, and he's like, they, it's individually based. They're not all wrong. They're not all right, right? And he's like, our team's trying to do research to figure out the explanation for those because a lot of times those don't have great explanations, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was pretty cool, and kind of excited to see what he comes out with. I didn't
Do
catch.
you use a Whoop or any sort of health tracking data?
No, and he kind of he talked to exactly why I don't do it is because I think I would make myself have worse sleep if I saw my sleep tracking. I'd be like, "Oh, I had a bad sleep last night. Like I'm gonna be tired today." I think it would affect me more than it would help me.
It's funny because that's a very similar place I landed where I used to have them, and now I don't wear them anymore. I maybe throw my Apple Watch on to run just to get that extra bit of dopamine for saying I ran a mile.
That's seriously why you'd wear it?
Yeah,
Dang.
but you don't
I
get like
give it to you.
you don't like
Give me a
love like
call.
hitting end at the end and be like, yeah, look at that, look at that.
Dude,
Not that I'm ever
this
gonna do anything with that data. But boy, does it feel good.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that was a thing.
You don't have anything like that where like Leslie will make a checklist just like let's say she had three things she wanted to do and she already did two of them. She'll make a checklist that has those three things just so she can check off the box of the first two. Nothing like that.
No, I feel like I've done the checkbox thing like way long ago. That's before.
I think that's pretty common. I don't think that's a rare thing, but anyways, um the whoop data is like I don't like it for myself, but boy does it give you really interesting data in terms of like the population. A lot of what makes studying human health really hard is every person's different and there's so many variables. But when you can really start collecting mass data on people that don't have to sign up to do an experiment, don't have to be a part of randomized trials, you just get this large metadata. I think it's gonna,
You have access to the Whoop's data. Is that like part of the agreement when you sign up for Whoop or something?
yeah, just like any of those things is.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So one of the gripes I had is it seemed like all of his research that he was referring to was based on happiness, and like that's just something that's very hard to measure. And it's like because like to me, I know like our mom, you could put like he talked a lot about being in communication with other people, relating to people's happiness. You could put mom anywhere in this world, in any situation, she'd be happy. I know people that you could put anywhere in any situation, they'd be mad or not happy. And I thought having a lot of these references and research based on happiness, I was like, I just don't love that as a metric to do research on. Like, that was one of the initial things that I was a little bit skeptical of because that's a very manipulative.
it's squishy. It's
Data.
not. It's not exactly quantitative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it only works at large population levels, but that's where he's doing it at. Like, if you ask the whole country, rate your happiness out of 10, and then
Okay.
50 years
So
later,
you're
you ask the
telling me
whole
he did the
country.
perfect census of the country, like a pollster.
But that's where
He
he's getting these from. He's not doing individual studies.
where where's he getting it from?
He's getting these large, decades long studies
From who?
from published data.
From people, companies
I
that
mean,
do
I'm
polls.
sure we could find some. I don't think it'd be hard. The
I
census
mean, that's
data
like
for the
saying
United States is
that's like saying,
available.
oh, they're getting this data from historical polling data of who they're going to vote for. You know, just because it's historical doesn't mean it's accurate.
No, but I mean, when your job is to study it and you don't have like he doesn't have a side. He doesn't sell more books if like well, what side do you think he's on that he's trying
I
to
mean,
prop up?
whatever his research thesis is, right? Like his research thesis is that people, the main one in the first 30 minutes was that autonomy is killing people's happiness in the modern world because they aren't having enough relational interactions, which I agree with, but I felt like he was going way too far to explain something that's very simple. And that's his job, right? His job is to do research and make it sound statistically and scientifically like very accurate and correct. But to me, it just sounds like a very simple concept that like I felt like didn't need to go that deep. Like, oh, you probably are going to be happy if you have a lot of good relationships in your life.
But
You
if it's
just
just like if it's just like shallow and it's just observation, then it's just that he's just a observationist. He's not a
yes, and I agree with that, and that's what
psychologist.
I'm saying. It's his job to do research, but and it's a very hard area to do research on. And an initial gripe of mine is that you're doing a research where the main metric point is happiness, and that's something that's not measurable. It's not.
I don't think it's all about happiness, but I mean, I see where you're
That's
going with
what his
this.
whole first 30 minutes was about.
Well, there's
People's
there's
happiness
happiness,
rating based
there's
on their
satisfaction, there's all sorts of emotions. There's
yeah, but that's
depression,
all
there's anxiety.
you brought up.
Say that one more time.
That's like the main one he kept talking about in his studies he's referring to.
Yeah, I think that's what people care about the most. And if you ask me,
You get where I'm coming from, though. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just
yeah,
saying when like in terms of like warning flags, when you're listening to people on the internet, when they start talking about their research and their polling of people's happiness, it's like that's a hard one to trust.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's ways where you can pull, you can cherry pick data, you can do whatever you want and make a case for something. But I feel like I don't know, I at least trust myself to have a good instinct on those, and I didn't get those same red flags from this guy. But
Okay, so how about this? I, we, I feel bad, but um, he spent the first 40 minutes talking about this problem of people not having enough relationships. And then he talks about the pros of having a robot nanny. It's okay because he explained like no, like it is like it's going to mimic human relations perfectly. But then he did mention that he does have a nanny currently. I'm like, how do you spend all this time preaching about human relationships, building those and that leading to happiness, and then have a nanny for your kids? I felt like that was like when he said that, I was like, strike. You got two strikes, dude. Did you
he's
catch that?
rich.
Did you catch that?
But he's rich.
Yeah, but he's preaching about how to be a happy human.
I didn't get any preaching. I didn't get that. You got I that didn't none of this came off as preachy. Like he wasn't trying to get you to join his religion. He wasn't trying to get you to join the Democrats. There was no like what side is he on? Like that's what I'm not getting.
He's not, well, I mean, he's on the side he wants you to read his book.
Okay, well that that's not a very like polarizing side. I mean that's weird. I don't have that much skepticism to everyone that's an author. I mean that's everyone on a podcast nowadays.
Do you not think that that was a little contradicting to his whole 40
I
minutes?
I thought the robot stuff was weird, but
But more specifically, that he does have a nanny after he just talked about the importance of human relations.
no, I was surprised. I was surprised. It wasn't a you know when you have someone that's on an interesting topic that is a free thinker, you should be surprised by some of the opinions they have. You should not be able to predict them, and you shouldn't agree with all of them. If those three things are true, then you're in a little bubble with that person.
What were the three things that you just stated?
if you can predict all of his opinions up front, right? Like if Charlie Kirk, I can predict all of his opinions right now. I can tell you all of them. I've never hung out with him. I don't think I've listened to a full podcast of his. I see clips on the internet. I bet I could tell you every single one of his political opinions, right? If I think I can predict all of them. So if there's no like, oh man, I'm surprised he had that opinion, then they're not a free thinker. They're not a legitimate like let's go discover and have my own opinions person. But anyways, the robot thing was weird. I agree. He was a strong proponent of robots are going to be very helpful in these social fabric bonding scenarios, which I like Stephen, the Diary of a CEO podcaster, uh, had the opposite like visceral reaction. Like, no, this sounds dystopian. Uh, But it was an interesting thing because I had never, you think about robots helping you with the laundry, helping you with um, your chores, mowing the lawn. You don't think about them helping you with parenting. And I don't know why that's not obvious, but it definitely is going to happen. They are definitely going to change diapers. They're definitely going to watch your kids outside. I don't like it. Hopefully, I'll have the luxury of not needing it. But man, it was kind of eye opening to me that
I think
that's going to be a part of the social dynamic of the future.
yeah, you said you're surprised it wasn't obvious. I feel like it's not an it's that is definitely when you talk about robots, that's probably going to be the most controversial thing because that is like the one of the most precious things of life is babies, and the
Hmm.
fact that you would outsource them to robots is really dystopian. I think that would answer your question of why that hasn't been thought of.
So, but I think it brings up good points. There will be people on the other side that make the argument that robots are better than, especially some parents, right? And then there will be people that, I mean, we all know absentee parents. We all know kids that have parents that don't pay much attention to them, are too busy for them, neglect them. And there could be real cases where that actually helps the scenario and it becomes a normal thing really fast.
I think in that scenario, when you think about like when people bring up robots and they say like when they become conscious and will they have the same rights as humans? I think like your first like way to that scenario is if a robot was someone's dad.
Yeah.
Like that's a robot gets assigned to the job of raise this baby, and for the next 18 years, it's raising that baby, and that's someone's dad.
It's
That's a
funny
good
because I've
story.
thought through the scenario of the girlfriend robot, and it never crossed my mind that there would be a parent robot. But
Yeah, I think his biggest. It seemed like the reason he thought it was a net positive was because it would help raise the birth rate. Um,
yeah, that was an
and
interesting
that was
part about that too.
my perspective of his uh, idea behind that was it would raise the birth rate, and that's like the most important thing that he saw as an issue in the next 100 years.
Right. It makes
Less,
raising kids easier, so people are incentivized
yeah,
to go have
it seemed
more.
like it was less the fact that it's a net positive thing as far as human relation and growing up, as opposed to it was a positive thing for the population.
Hmm.
That's what he seemed to what he liked.
So one of the things that I went through, and I wrote it down here, is that just in this podcast alone, he listed like two or three. In a lot of podcasts I listen to, there's a common theme here where there's so many forces that are anti kids right now. It's kind of crazy. Let me just kind of read you what I came up with just off the top of my head from all the podcasts we've listened to. You got the plastics and the hormone disruptors that are, making people less fertile, throwing hormone levels off balance. So you got a environmental factor there. The economy's getting tougher, right? And when the economy gets tougher, people have less kids because they're less to afford them. I feel like there's a lot of societal pressures, right? Abortion. There's this attitude that your life is more important than your potential child's. Prioritize you. Go out and have a bunch of vacations in your 20s and then have kids in your 30s type of attitudes. There's there's global warming and overpopulation, so you do your part and not have too many kids. There's birth control, there's condoms, and there's I'm blanking on the name, but when guys get snipped, that's
Uh,
super common.
yeah,
He talked about pornography and social media and how that is, you know, as substitute for having sex in a lot of people's lives. It's encouraging less social interactions, which leads to less sex, which leads to less babies.
yeah. I saw a
Um,
take online that like because of that, like if you don't have that, your testosterone gets so built up, and then you do have courage to go out and talk to girls and stuff. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense.
there's less religion, and I don't know exactly. It just feels to me like religious people have more kids. They build better family structures that are good for raising kids. I feel like a lot of the consequences of religions breed bigger families. And then last I have the metaverse is coming, so I can't imagine that's going to help very much. But I just listed like 12 huge factors that all are anti people having babies.
Yeah. I feel like the biggest one is inflation and
The economy.
economical freedom. That seems like an obvious one to me, but
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Almost all my friends, and I think you agree, people aren't getting pregnant until they're 30. Just crazy. I wonder what the average age of your first child was in the Industrial Revolution. Was it 18? Was it 20? It just feels like it's very different than it is now. You know what stat I saw the other day? First, or the average homeowner's age of when they buy their first house is now 37 years old.
wow. The average age of your have the first kid was 21 in the Industrial Revolution.
Wow. What is it now? Can you look that up real fast?
Yeah. 27 and a half.
Yep. That feels about right because you got the small group of people that get pregnant in high school still. And they're probably helping outweigh the people that never have kids. I wonder if they're even included in
Yeah,
that data.
so 7 years, that's probably like an ability of having two kids, right? You lose like two years of
Yeah, I mean at least
not 2 years,
right.
but
We've had a kid every 2 years. It seems like. But yeah, you're super fertile when you're 21. That's for sure. I mean, you're gonna get. But
yeah, they had an interesting religious section when they were talking about that. Um, and I thought they both had they're very free thinkers in that section of the podcast because he had a book or his book chapter 8 they said was religion section.
did any of those parts surprise you?
Um, One stuck out is he mentioned that he thinks that all humans have a void for
A
like
God-sized void
yeah
or a God-shaped void?
yeah, and that was just like that's like
That was a quote, and I don't
because
know who that's from. That was a good one.
there's not an industrial or an answer to that, right? Of like why humans have that other than I don't even know if he gave an answer why that's there other than that it's very beneficial for humans to fill that void and very fruitful for humans to fill that void.
Yeah, I like that quote a lot because it does feel like everyone has had that feeling. It's hard to describe, and I feel like that quote nails it. It's like there's something inside of you that programs you to look for reason and meaning and supernatural answers. Fill that remarkably well, remarkably well. I mean, so much so there's religion everywhere. There's none of it's the same, but you can't find a single place without religion.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
so the one that surprised me the most was the the fact that rich people benefit more from regular church than poor people, and that I thought it was going to be the opposite because you think you're poor, you're being part of the bigger group helps you. Um, but his read on the data was that those poor people already have a huge social connection because they need it. It's a necessity. And it's the rich people that in modern society can live without all those connections. They're self sufficient. And going to church really brings that part of their social life back. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. That one's one thing I was curious if he had thoughts on because it didn't seem directly answered. But like, I would say I would be surprised if you looked at that scenario of the rich person not in church and the one in church or religion. I feel like the rich person still has as much human contact. They're just not genuine relationships. They have less genuine relationships or like good relationships. and I would assume that the person in that religious context has more genuine relationships. And I feel like that's like it's the quality of human interaction. It's not the lack of human interaction. Like I'm curious if that has been addressed in his research and his thoughts. If it's is it the quality or is it the lack of? Because it seems specifically he mentioned it's the lack of human relationships and interaction, not the quality. I'm curious if it maybe I missed that, but I'm curious if
That
that.
was the read I got from him was it was more so quality than just number of
Oh,
interactions. But maybe I was putting my own,
I
flavor
mean,
on it.
that that seems a lot more obvious to me, but I didn't hear the specific wording that that was the case. But I,
Yeah. I mean, the whole time I was picturing like those are people that actually care about you,
yeah,
right? You're like your tribe. It
like I like so. One of the things I was really curious to see why you wanted to listen to this is because something I've heard from you multiple times is you really like to learn like specific like you want to learn knowledge from these. And I was like, I felt like these were a lot of obvious answers. Like, yeah, it's important for human happiness to have these strong relationships. And so that's why I was partially why I was curious why, at least in the first 40 minutes, because it was mainly talking about that one research point. I think the rest of the second half of the podcast was better, but
I think that's it. So it's like it's one of those things where like duh, social interaction is good for people, but it's so easily overlooked in most people's lives. And I think it's not until you have conversations like these you start reflecting on the ones that you have or don't have. Like me, the example that kept popping up is I go to basketball every Wednesday night and every Sunday, and I don't miss it. I don't miss it for anything unless it's my kid's birthday. There's no like, there's nothing. I don't even miss it for my kids. And we do everything together. But it's like, hearing this, it's like, oh yeah, those are one of the few times I go out with other men, and those are that's my group, and we do an activity that we all love, and so it's like it's the exercise. I enjoy the sport, but I think a lot of the importance that it has to me is just that, and I had never really pieced that together before. So I don't know. I'll be honest with you. The behavior psychology thing is something I've always been interested in. It's like, why were we programmed this way? Why? What? What? I mean, so you can believe it. God programmed you a certain way, or you can believe evolution did, or maybe you have a weird hybrid opinion. But I like to. I really like that topic of understanding like what is this algorithm trying to influence versus what does it influence in today's modern world? That's such an interesting topic to me.
yeah.
Like
Well,
the potato chip example he had, right? Everyone knows it. Everyone knows that potato chips are hijacking our desire to go get sugar, salt, and fat, which was very hard to find on the Serengeti.
what
But
I was guessing, the reason you like or were interested in it was because of your kids and being
a little
able
bit,
to help them navigate. Because when you say like nowadays, like um, people have attacked our um, these things that our bodies respond to, like sugar and how our body work, how humans work, right? They've
our programming.
yeah,
That's
they've
what I call it.
taken advantage of certain ways we were programmed. Um, and I would say that's very important in being able to identify those and raise a kid because you want to be able to try to point those out for them, right? Show them examples of how people have been manipulated, and like I think examples. I've always learned from examples, but
Yeah, I wasn't so much thinking about that. But I do think like ultimately this problem gets harder as change continues to rapidly evolve. Like this problem's harder for us than it was for grandpa and grandpa, grandpa and grandma, right? They still had corn that didn't have pesticides sprayed all over it. They still had um, water without fluoride in it.
Have you
That,
seen the thing where if you like look where your corn's from and it's like from overseas and like Japan?
I
Have
have
you
not seen
checked
that.
that? Like if you have
Doesn't
canned
the
corn.
United States like grow like 95% of corn?
Yeah. And it's like the sweet corn that a lot of times you find in stores is like from overseas.
Oh, really? Hmm. I did not see that.
I want to go check my corn.
But it's the food. It's the medicine. It's the social media. It's there's so many things that our programming is not optimized for. And what I try to do, and kind of like a almost like a first principle of mine, is um, try to align my life to that programming. Because I think even though it's antiquated programming at this point, it's the programming I have. So, and happiness, I agree with you. I don't think is a good score, but I think overall, what I want my life to be is, well, I'll be happier with it the more I'm aligned to that programming.
Like like, what do you mean? The more you're aligned to that programming?
So, like, the more I feed it the social interactions, the more I feed it the food it was used to
Yeah.
10,000 years ago, the more the closer you can get your life. Like, I still like air conditioning, right? But part of me believes you should be hot sometimes and you should be cold sometimes. And I take that, I mean, because I think our programming is meant for that. And I think you see little traces of that when Rhonda Patrick talks about heat shock proteins from sauna use, or name your bro scientist that talks about how good the cold plunge is, right? That isn't because we are designed for a cold plunge to make us more optimal. It's because we were designed to be freaking cold all winter, right? And we had to survive. And so I like trying to understand, how those things. When people like this guy can go and study it for a living, I eat it up. When there's content out there, I love it. That's why I picked this one.
Yeah. I did you learn any new things in that area?
Let's see.
Yes. Because I feel like a lot of it has been more reiteration. So I'm curious if I missed something. I did listen. So take this, dude. I know you're typically a 1.5 podcaster. Is that it?
Yeah, 1.5 to 1.8.
See, I'm typically like 1.2. Unless it's like I'm unless it's just like more of a fun Saturday afternoon one. I'm like one. But I got up to 1.5 this time, and I was chilling. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. And then that went up to 1.8. I was like, okay, I'm keeping up. And that went up to 2. I can't do 2. And I went back to 1.8, and then 1.8 sounded really reasonable after I was at 2 for like 5 minutes.
And it sounds like this one was a chore for you.
It was.
It was okay.
The
That's fair.
the last 30 minutes was better, but the first 30 when he talked about autonomy, I think part of it is I felt like I didn't need a rundown on that the negative of autonomy and lack of relationships. I feel like that part's very balanced in my life. And then also, if anything, it's balanced more towards the autonomy stuff right now, um, because this year I'm more focused on growing career wise and development, like different development areas. Um,
So you asked like which of the ideas were novel. I thought that was something I'd never heard before. Like the comparing autonomy to what did he say, connection. And his point was so I liked it. It was back when there was a tribe and you were hunting to survive. If the tribe wanted to go right and you wanted to go left, you went right because you lived when you went with the tribe and you didn't. So that freedom of expression, that freedom of choice, the decision that's uniquely tailored to you was it was a luxury. It's kind of how he framed it. I liked it. I like that idea because nowadays Leslie and I don't always watch the same thing on TV anymore, right? If I pick a show I like, right? I picked the animated Lord of the Rings last night. Great movie, by the way. Uh, not Leslie's pick, and she did not watch it, right? So we sat in the same room, and she went through her social media the whole movie, and I watched the movie. And so even in our entertainment, right, where a lot of the times is the only time families meet anymore is in front of the TV. We're not even watching the same thing anymore. So there's nothing to connect over. And so I don't know. It's I think it's very prevalent, right? He essentially makes the claim that because autonomy was such a luxury item, like sugar was back then, we're programmed to get it where we can. And nowadays, you can get it wherever. I mean, cities are designed for it. You can have whatever job you want. You can have whatever entertainment you want. You can have your form of exercise while your wife has her form of exercise. There's so many things that it's just personalized to you. And every time we choose that, selfishly, it makes us less happy or satisfied or content, whatever description for that positive emotion you want to put on there in the long run. And I think he nailed it.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious that if you aren't doing those activities together, you're not building your relationship, right? It's just I think about like how many things that me and my wife don't do together, like when she's watching her own shows or whatever. It's like, would it be worth it if we both watched a show that we averagely liked
Right.
versus doing our own thing?
That's his argument. It's
Like
like
me,
you will be overall happier or whatever description you want if you make more of those choices.
I don't see me being able to convince Corinne to watch a show, so that's put a lot of pressure on me to have to watch Housewives of whatever.
You know, one of the things that so he said, I think it's towards the end, but one of his advice was it was in the five things that would make you happier. It was find find lifestyle activities that you could do with others, right? That you can do it together and stick together on it. And one of the things I thought about was like, that's video games get a lot of bad rap, but how much time have the four of us brothers spent on video games since we've graduated high school, compared to everything else we've done as a foursome? I bet it dominates the time we've spent together.
Yeah.
And would we have spent that time together without him? So I'm always looking for reasons to justify my video game playing. There's another reason.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it was always basketball for us. I think that's one of the reasons I love basketball. It's something we all love doing. There was no compromise when we decided to play basketball, except for Manning, because he sucks at basketball. It's okay.
There's definitely something special where when everyone wants to do something. But like, I don't know. I feel like I don't know. It doesn't seem like this. I'm glad you enjoyed the podcast.
I
It just
did.
doesn't seem groundbreaking to me. Like it feels like that's kind of it's like yeah, you do certain things because it's fun to do with people. Like there's a lot of things I wouldn't do if it wasn't with people. Uh, I'm being a Debbie Downer, and I know I am. Trying not to be. Uh,
That's all right. That's all right. Hey, just hop on my shoulders. I'll carry you there. Okay. So I went to the daddy daughter dance with Leia
yeah, how's
the
that?
other night, and it was really cool. We loved it. She had a blast. I had a blast. I was super nervous. It was gonna suck. And I was just gonna stand there like with my hands in my pockets, awkwardly standing next to Dad's. Um, but I had a friend I went with. He took his daughter, so I kind of had someone to like when it slowed down. Hey Johnny, let's talk. Um, but so I was there. There's probably 50 dads, 50 daughters in this 40 by 40 hall, and not one dad came up to me and introduced himself and talked. Right? Very commonly there was like that, hey, you knew one other dad, right? That was there and you kind of just hung next to your little I feel like us guys, we have lost that muscle completely. And I think girls always had that muscle, a bigger social muscle. that's for sure. But guys have lost it. I talked to two guys. Like, so Leia wanted to go to the activities table. We'd go over there, and I'd stand next to this guy awkwardly for like 5 seconds, and I'm finally like, no, fuck it, let's do this. What am I got to lose? I'm not asking him out on a date, right? The first guy I met, um, pastor named Hunter, which is crazy.
That's funny.
Um, he was really cool, great to talk to. Um, and the other guy, Andy, had three daughters. I asked him, like, did he ever expect to have three daughters? It was like easy. And then Leia pulled me away. We had to go run. She wanted to play tag or something across the other room. Um, but God, it felt good. It felt good to just meet somebody. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. It's so obvious. It's like one of those obvious things, like you're saying. It shouldn't be groundbreaking to anyone that social interaction's good. Social relationships are good for you.
No, I think that's something that people that's like a thing that it would be great if people kind of caught back onto. And I think the biggest like obvious thing with that is when you go to any waiting room, any line, everyone's on their phone. I typically think back like
Mm,
30 years ago, all these people would be talking to each other. If
yeah.
they weren't, they'd just be staring at a wall. And it's kind of crazy to me that it's changed this much for like all of human time to now in the past 20 years. Now humans don't interact in these uh, communal places, like in a line anywhere. Because like genuinely, you would like I think people don't understand how common it probably would have been to talk to people
And
everywhere.
isn't it crazy that was like 20 years ago?
Yeah,
And how fast that's forgotten.
but on the other end of the stick, I still think if you do drop the phone and talk to people, you're probably going to have a higher hit rate than you think.
Yeah, I
I,
was pleasantly surprised. And I left that being like, I'm doing that more. I'm just gonna start talking to people and see what happens. I'm never disappointed.
Mhm. That's funny. Like a couple months ago, Hunter told me he was like, "Yeah, I was at the park and I started talking to some other dads there, and I just kept doing it, and then I realized like ever since I've had kids, like people want to be talked to. It's just
Right.
they don't. Uh, There's
You
no
don't want to stand there awkwardly,
yeah.
right? And it turns out it's people like talking about themselves.
And
Right?
then also you have the other side where like if it doesn't go well, it's like I'm never gonna see you again. So
That's true. That's true. I've been thinking a lot about community lately and how to get some in this modern world. So much so I even thought about going to church, to be honest. What they had that part, he had that part of this that talked about how girls like or moms used to raise their kids with the tribe and it took so much help to raise kids. And I felt bad. It was like I took Leslie to California. We had four kids working on number five, and she was just all by herself. Like her parents were a 4 hour flight away, and we didn't have that church group. And um, really, California lacks any social, you know, groups, in my opinion, unless you're forget it, unless you're part of those weird wacko groups. Um, so
man,
like I thought
you
about
guys
it.
would make a great Sunday lunch after church lunch. You guys would be great hosts for some after church lunches.
I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great.
yeah. So he had that little part about his rich friend and him judging his rich friend about, if I was this rich, I would always be happy. I would always be content. And have you ever had that thrown back in your face where you're like, hey, have you seen the stat where you're in the top 1% globally for all incomes? You're richer than any king in the Middle Ages. Don't you love when that stat gets thrown back in your face when you're
Yeah,
having a bad day?
was it this one or a different one where it was like, yeah, if you make over $30,000, you're in the top 1% of like
That was a different
I think
one.
it was a
But
Doge.
isn't that crazy? You couldn't survive in America with less than 30,000 nowadays. Or I don't know how you did. I don't have the ability to.
Yeah, I do feel like I think about that maybe more than other people because a lot of times I'm like, well, if the average income is like 55,000, that means we just start cutting stuff and we'd be fine, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of like the Doge approach of cut all the bills and then see which ones you need.
that's right. That's right.
It's not a bad strategy every couple of years or something, you know?
I love being reminded that every now and then. Not that I appreciate everything I have. I think I'm pretty good at that, but it's always good to be reminded how lucky we are, how much we got. Um, Cities are only 5,000 years old. That was a that was an interesting fact. You don't think about cities as being invented.
I don't know, dude. You haven't talked to Joe Rogan or Elon, man. They think there's some crazy stuff going on. They don't want to say.
Hey, buddy. Um, People are happier in the country than they are in the city. Were you surprised by that, or do you think that was
Um,
another obvious one?
I I think that was one I haven't heard, which does seem obvious, but that was a better one, the better point that he brought up, um, because like
I think it's interesting that that holds true across economic
yeah
like I think it's obvious if you say if you make $1 million in the country versus $1 million in the city, yeah, you'd be happier in the country. But it was surprising to hear that the average city person makes 100,000 and the average country person makes 30, and they're still happier
yeah
even with that economic disparity.
it did make me think because I think a lot of the prosperity in my job field comes from like moving to bigger cities like headquarters and stuff like that. And it's like, well, the goal is to have a house with a big yard and
Right.
not in the city basically one day. So it's like it's kind of counterintuitive. Um,
Don't you feel like our generation is rediscovering that a little bit with the
yeah.
trad wives and the moving out into the country and kind
Well,
of
I
just
think the COVID kind of exploited that because there's like you felt like all this other stuff was poison or lies, and it was a cleansing to get away from the city and get away from the big pharma, the big mass producers of food, and go.
and it was it was almost like an enlightenment that you don't have to live this way. You don't
Yeah,
have to live the city lifestyle.
yeah.
Like I don't know, like it was we kind of forgot that it wasn't the only way to live. Right? He's nodding his head.
Um, I feel like that's definitely you hit that on the head. A lot of people still think that they can't do better for themselves in those areas of food and uh, self help, and they think that whatever they're doing from these big companies are the only way they can. It's very big. I wish I was more specific in that. So
No, but it's like I think even recently, maybe like 5 years ago, I if you would have told me I would have been happier in Harrisburg than I would in California, that just like objectively happier, but everything else would be exactly what I thought it'd be. I think I'd still choose California. Like I want experiences and everything, but I don't know. It's like and happiness isn't everything. It to me a really important part is doing something that's worth pursuing, right? So like building a cool airplane was I wasn't very happy when I was building that airplane, but the pursuit of that big accomplishment was everything to me.
yeah,
Um,
I think the biggest driver for me that's going to be like mid career driver is like wanting to do something like inspirational for my kids. Like I think it's such a shame to live like a boring life of like just contentment. I don't think that's inspirational, you know, and that's probably just on an individual basis, and that's fine. But
you think you'll feel that same way as you age?
I think it'll ebb and flow. I've always like there's certain times where I'm like, yeah, like it'll be really nice just to be able to get to a point where I can just like cruise and not have to work as hard. But then I go back on it, it's like that's not inspirational. That's not a life I would want my kids to look up to. It's like, oh, he worked hard at some point, I guess, and now he doesn't work at all. You have the pro of like, yeah, you get to spend time with them and you devote your time with them. I don't know. I think there's something about having your role model do something inspirational other than just spend time with you. You know, we'll see. That's a lot of projecting into the future.
So I think that it's kind of um, it's appropriate this conversation because I think that your hormones and the way your hormones change over life kind of matches that. You're supposed to go and try to do great things when you're younger, and then you have a family, and it kind of right. I think there's a natural progression there, and I think it matches a lot of your hormonal programming. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a book out there about it. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I like. I think that information there is enough. I don't need a whole research article like that unless it's in the contrary. Nothing's gonna make me believe that anymore. Like I think that seems pretty obvious. Your hormones change, your desires change, what's important to you changes. You have limited time. You have a lot of kids that require a lot of time. It's like, it, yeah, you're probably, if you're a devoted parent, you're going to want to spend more time with your kids and less on work.
so the other one was about status,
Mm.
and status was it's funny. Like I could see how you could say "oh duh" for all of these, but I thought it was interesting. Like why do we care about status? I think it's a question worth asking. It has an interesting answer. It's a way of signaling worth to the other sex for procreation, and it's you apply it today. It's like how yeah, how can you justify paying $2,000 for a Louis Vuitton bag? The bag by no means is worth $2,000, except in the form that it's a status symbol. Why are people programmed to want to go and show their status by buying a bag? It's both very obvious, but at the same time, it doesn't make any sense. It's not obvious to me.
Like, why other people?
Yeah, like what? I'm so surprised other people can't see through it.
Yeah.
Like I see that bag and I'm like, oh, I think less of you now. But they keep selling them every year.
Yeah.
People
I
keep
mean,
wanting them.
you probably have a lower threshold though, right? It's like, if you're looking at someone like maybe a Louis Vuitton bag's too far, but like you would want to find someone who's like well dressed, has nice hair. Well, yeah, they spend a lot of money on their hair, their clothing. It's not designer, but it's nice and it's expensive. It doesn't make them a better person because of that, but you're probably more attracted to them. So it's just like people have different like standards of where that investment into status would be at, right?
But isn't it? It's just funny that we all have this built-in programming
Yeah.
to want to obtain status for the reason of finding a mate. It's I don't know. I find it interesting. Like you can picture it like back in the day if you had all the cool stuff because you're big enough to
I
beat
mean, it's
everybody
kind of
else
just
up.
like it's I think it's more of a indicator of wealth rather than status
But why is wealth attractive?
because
It like
it's
raises your status. There's a reason Bill Gates has a
wealth ensures safety.
yeah. I think don't you think it's all related to status? Like that's what status means.
I think wealth would be the root rather than status. I think
Yeah, but
status is
status
still
is
more
more a more
motivational.
holistic picture. It's also how much people like you and how much people want to be around you and how good of health you are.
Yeah.
How popular you are at school. It's not always the
So
richest kid that's the most popular.
it would be like status would be your accumulation of wealth in different areas, whether it's monetary, community.
So the question I had for you, would you ever, and this is like easy to ask now that you've already picked, so you can say whatever you want, but would you ever marry a woman that had a higher status than you? Or just if you want to answer, like, made more than you?
I don't think that would. My biggest thing with finding a wife, and I would recommend it to other people with shoes.
Hey, babe.
Just a second, why Stern takes Cannon out here.
Sorry, Conley. The baby started singing. I couldn't hear you.
Um, but my answer to that would be no, but with the exception of like it was
Like, no, you couldn't do it.
no, I could like it wouldn't bother me, with the exception that they would be able to stay home with the kids. So like once they don't need to be home with the kids, they go back to work. But like I don't care if before they have kids that they make more. I really don't. I don't think that that would have ever been a deal breaker. If Corinne wants to go get a job making a lot more money,
I think it'd be hard.
I
I
doubt
think
it.
it'd be really hard. Like
Dude,
if Leslie was
if
a
Corinne
doctor
made more
making
money than me, we'd be just swimming. It'd be great.
just like some part of the being a man in the relationship that is attached to
I'll tell you
providing.
what, dude. I would make you work hard. You'd be out here working really hard to start making more money.
You say it'd be motivational?
If it bothered you that much, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not for me, I don't think. Oh, how about that stat that, or it wasn't really a stat, it was just like a, in the past, there were a bunch of men that never procreated. Like there's twice as many moms in your past as there are dads.
Yeah, that was a new one. I didn't know that was. I you know what that made me think of? Have you seen Tigers on Netflix with Shane Gillis?
Yeah, yeah.
The guy who runs the store. I was like, yep, that would be the example. 20% that don't ever. I was like, makes sense.
And so I thought it was interesting because I I looked at today's environment where women are, you know, climbing that status ladder, and there are so many things that make the men women want to settle down with increasingly smaller, um that it's going to reach this boiling point where the successful women can't find enough dudes, that something is going to explode, change, shift. um the bubble's going to pop. But if this is how human history was, maybe this is just a new normal and not every man finds a woman.
Yeah.
And maybe half of the men get twice the girls. And that, it just like, if we're returning to this weird point where you have twice as many moms as you have dads in your history, um I don't know, that's different than how society has been from
Yeah,
what we
I don't,
know.
that's never really been a fact that I've heard that there's twice as many.
Wasn't it wild how they found it? That was, so here, let me try to run it back for people listening. It was, there's certain parts of your gene that are only given to you from your mom, and there's certain parts of your genetic code that are only given to you from your dad. And when they look at the genetic variability in those Y specific genes, there was half the variability as there were in the ones provided from the mother. Um, it's, it's crazy, but you can kind of picture a past where, you know, if you weren't big enough to hold a sword, you didn't procreate.
Yeah.
And it feels like the world's gotten a lot, more soft and squishy, and now Bill Gates can procreate, right? Where in the past he wasn't. I don't care how cool sling he could have made, he wasn't making it. Just this, I don't know. The future is going to be so different than the present so quickly. I think this is part of it.
Yeah. It's the present's going to be different than the present. It's moving so fast.
It really is. I mean, we're already to a point where more girls graduate college than guys. And how many girls did you know growing up that would date down? Because it's not something they do.
Yeah.
Do. He had a really good line. Natural doesn't mean good. You can tell he's had a lot of these conversations before where it's like he explains that it's natural to do this thing, and people are like, well, that's not good. Well, I think it I think it's important when we talk about this programming, and really, if you want to have the conversation about evolution, you can nip it in the bud if you don't want to talk about it. But evolution doesn't care what's good or fair. It's all about what passes things along to the next generation and survives. There's no feelings, there's no right or wrong around it. And it's funny how a lot of these things pop up and you're like, well, that's not fair. That's not nice. That doesn't feel right. Well, it doesn't matter. You know, did that trait survive? Increase survivability or procreation, right? I like that. Natural doesn't mean good. I thought that was well put. What else we got? Oh, the party had about like when you were in a tribe of 100 people, you could be the best at something.
Yeah.
And in today's world, you can't be the best at something anymore.
Yeah, that's a big difference for humans. Like when you're a kid and you're like the best in your school and you figure out you're not the best,
Right.
and just like in your school district or in your competitive the teams you play against, and then you start to learn like, oh, that's not even in the grand scope of the state, and then you figure out the nation, and then
Yeah.
yeah.
It's humbling. It's really fast.
Yeah, because when you are kids, right, it does feel like you're the best in the world at whatever that is if you're the best at your school.
That's right. And that was the perspective we were designed to live with. It's kind of like the same thing as like you weren't designed to hear the news for the whole world, right? You weren't designed to know there was a plane crash in Korea last week, right? You're not programmed to take in that much bad news that all the time.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But now it's social media is, and I wonder how much this affects kids' confidence. You're never going to be the most attractive. You're never going to be the most talented at anything you do. You'll always be able to, at the click of a button, see something you're interested in and someone doing it better. And that could motivate you. And I think that raises the overall quality because those things compete in a bigger market. But it's got to be disheartening.
Yeah, I agree. It's something not natural, I don't think, for humans to have to deal with that really social dilemma of social media and widespread news.
Um, do you agree that experience makes you happier than possessions?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very hard decision to make. Um, right now, I feel like experiences are very expensive.
They are.
Like
They are.
like I agree individually experiences are better than like uh items or whatever. But like when you look at bang for your buck, it's like I can buy a lot of items for that one experience. And it's like, well, I don't know. Maybe that's something to look into deeper is that exchange rate between experience and items because it depends. Like if it's like I don't know. I'm sure you're in the boat where it's like if we can buy an item for the house that we can use on repeat for the next 2 years.
Yeah. Get a new water heater or go on a vacation.
Yeah, it's like obviously I think there is a gray area of items that create experiences, right? Like if you go buy a basketball hoop, if you go buy a basketball or something that you can do things with, like that's an item, and I feel like that's what people kind of nip at, as in like I don't know, you shouldn't be spending your money on it. Maybe they're more like I guess maybe the concern there is like are you buying excessive expenses on your items, you know.
All right. Well, I got kids singing. Connie's got dogs barking.
Dude, he is sounding like an imbecile. I'm sorry for my neighbors. My neighbors are just so nice of people. I will say that. The fact that they have not jumped across the fence and slapped my dog for barking is crazy. And I
All right.
appreciate it.
Well, let's wrap this one up. I appreciate you coming into my world a little bit on this one.
Yeah. Hopefully I wasn't hopefully I was somewhat open minded for it.
You sucked this whole hour and a half, but it's all right. It's gonna happen. um, uh, yeah. Let's wrap there. Thanks everybody. Episode 21.
All right. Peace.